American Tour complete, new second strip unveiled as well. I have to tell you, I like the white on blue. That's always been a classic Villa look. If you fancy it, I've got a link in the description below. And was the group that played against Brentford similar to the one that we expect to start on match day 1, which is now closing upon us? Can you feel it? Let's get cracking. Let's go. The Summer Soccer Series review starts now. Now, I try not to get too heavily invested in casual summertime kickabouts on foreign soil, especially when one of the opponents happens to be the team you're playing on opening day. It's not like Aston Villa is going to pull out the grade A set piece routines for that game, obviously. This is about getting minutes under the belt, getting the fitness up to speed, match day, game fitness, starting to develop some combinations and relationships, and most importantly, integrating new faces into the squad. What I want to focus on is some of the bigger themes and issues that are emerging from the collective 3 games on this tour. The other purpose of a tour like this, of course, is to attract more neutral eyeballs from far away foreign lands, people without Premier League club affiliations, and I have to think that Villa became a very compelling study during those 3 games, and I'm sure a lot of people stateside said, geez, you know what? That team's kind of exciting. They've got a lot of interesting components, and the way they play is very unique. If you're judging just based on my little community, I've had a lot more social traction from the United States. So mission accomplished if you're Aston Villa in terms of trying to get the brand out there. Here we go to Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, where Christopher Heck turned a dilapidated, broken down basketball franchise into a $3 billion enterprise. If you are going to make a trip to the United States one day, I think Philadelphia should be in the mix, along with New York for sure, and Chicago. Wonderful cities with so much history and character and really cool people. Don't get a cheesesteak, though. That's a very touristy thing. And do try to get in a sporting event, too, because the fans of sports in Philadelphia are a very special and dedicated breed, and their sports keep getting better. All their teams are doing really well. Issue number 5, the book on Boubacar. We've been linked with numerous central midfielders, mostly on the defensive side. The latest, Sofiane Amrabat, the Moroccan who plays at Fiorentina. We've been linked with Tyler Adams pretty much all summer, and Frank Kessie, too, from Barcelona for a while. And the 2-2 goal against Newcastle came as a direct result of Boubacar Kamara coughing up the ball under pressure. And we know that 8 out of 10 times Kamara is either going to wriggle away from that or draw a foul. But 2 out of 10 of those times, he's going to lose the ball and require some help, or it's going to lead to a goal. All the other teams know that. Now, keep in mind, Kamara is still developing. He's probably 2 full years behind where Douglas Luiz is right now. Oh my goodness, could you imagine if he grows to that? And he probably started off with more tools than Douglas Luiz. But if we really are moving on from Leander Dendoncker and/or Callum Chambers, I'm warming up to the idea of having some insurance in that role. And of course, competition could be really good for his growth. Number 4, defensive decisions. It's a good problem to have when you have to leave an odd man out amongst a pretty good ensemble of center backs. But for me, right now, at this moment in time, it is Diego Carlos, and I'm going to give the guy a ton of latitude because we're not even a year since one of the worst injuries a footballer can suffer. And wasn't it interesting? In the Walsall preseason game, from the corner we got scored on, Carlos went up for it. He got about 2 inches off the ground. He missed it, and of course, Feeney then wasn't able to deal with it, and we got scored on. But that was the exact kind of scenario where he ruptured his Achilles against Everton almost a year ago. So we have to give him the latitude to get his mojo back. And I just finished watching the Federico Chiesa documentary, Back on Track, which follows his rehab after an ACL tear. And all the physios, all the doctors, everybody said the same thing. Injury recovery is 70% mental. Think about that for a minute. 30% muscular, rehab, exercises, all that physical stuff. 70% is mental. So let's leave Diego Carlos to get back on track on his own time and pace, because he will. The man is a specimen. In fact, the best line from any of the three games from the commentators, Diego Carlos doesn't look like he was born. It looks like he was chiseled out of granite, which is true. And he will be back and he will be excellent. Just not right yet. Number 3, backup business. Being the backup to Emi Martinez might be one of the worst jobs in football, because all you have to look forward to is hopefully a good Europa Conference League run or good domestic cup runs. But beyond that, he's going to play. In fact, Emi might play in some of those games as well. Do we trust Robin Olsen to fill in that deputy role? Because in a system employed by Unai Emery that requires the goalkeeper to be very good with his feet, I don't feel Olsen has progressed in that regard like Martinez has. In fact, in the second half of that game, he literally gave the ball directly to a Magpie opponent, and on a couple of occasions, he drifted the ball over his fullbacks' heads. If Unai Emery says we're not shopping for a backup goalkeeper, we're happy with what we have, I accept that as being okay. But inside, I'm thinking, gulp. Number 2, Omari, oh my. When the manager, Unai Emery, comes out after the game and says, Tielemans was brilliant. Bit of a gamble, because if you're the player, you will receive that one of two ways. First way is, oh my goodness, the manager said I was brilliant. How do I stay brilliant? What do I have to do? How much harder do I have to work to make sure I'm staying in his good books and stay in this squad? Or the manager said I was brilliant. It's one of those two things. But this is a 17-year-old kid, and he sets up the 3-2 goal with a well-saved shot. He probably should have scored after that when he beats the trap, sits down an opponent, and this is where the risk comes in. You know, he needs to build that confidence to finish those chances and be ruthless. But if he really is the it kid in the academy right now, then what happens to him after this preseason and where he ends up playing is going to be really important for his development pathway. And the number 1 issue from Philadelphia and the Newcastle match, brilliant Buendia. What can you say? He was by far the most influential and effective player, contributed to all 3 goals, and played like a guy who was reading the rumors linking us to MLS phenom, 22-year-old Thiago Almada, another Argentine, who has a very impressive goal contribution ratio, and at $17 million, not a bad price. The issue with Buendia, since he has signed for a record fee 2 years ago, is emotional intelligence and consistency. If that Emi Buendia showed up every single game, we would be in the Champions League places. Now, of course, he's going to follow that straight up. That performance, he's just going to carry straight on into Orlando against Fulham, isn't he? Off to the next stop on the tour, Orlando. I thought about Orlando, but I stuck with Orlando. And being on the U.S. East Coast, much easier to manage from a time zone perspective than, say, Australia was last year, which might have actually had more implications than we want to admit. But when you're on the eastern U.S. seaboard, especially central Florida, you could set your clock by the late summertime afternoon thunderstorm. I mean, it's sunny 1 minute, then dark and thunder and lightning with biblical rain that fills up the streets, and then it just stops and clears away, and it's sunny and fresh and everything's lush and green, and it certainly made the pitch at Exploria Stadium much slower, which was probably a good test for the players, but also very human. I mean, did you see how much they were perspiring just after 20 minutes of the Fulham game? Number 5, erratic Emi Buendia, unable to follow up on his performance against Philadelphia. We saw a lot of over or under hit passes, the frustrated body language again, as if he's almost keeping inventory of his mistakes. That comes down to, as I mentioned earlier, emotional intelligence. On the positive side, however, in both games, he was employed on the left side of that 3 like an inverted winger, not as the number 10, which seems to be John McGinn's new and permanent role, which makes perfect sense. And to his credit, Emi Buendia does one thing very, very well. Maybe we don't talk about it enough, and maybe it helps us forgive the lack of precision on some of his passing. He helps win the ball back regularly in the press, and that's really, really important. But nobody, apart from Ollie Watkins, divides the Aston Villa fan base as much as this player, and there's a reason for it. He's inconsistent, which is why maybe he is better for us coming off the bench against tired legs. Issue 4, our flexible number 4, Ezri Konsa. A lot of people wondered what would happen to Konsa when Pau Torres joined, and with Diego Carlos now fully fit, would he play as a right back? No, he can't play as a right back. What a waste of a player. He's not capable of doing that. Well, lo and behold, he played the farthest right defender of a flat back 4 with Luca Dean on the left. And he just went about his business as usual, not getting dribbled past, tracking runners, blocking crosses, winning aerial duels. And he had a good assignment as well, because he came up against D. Cordova-Reid, at times Kearney, at times Mbabu, and he looked perfectly comfortable with all of it. He is becoming a grizzled Premier League veteran right before our eyes without any razzle-dazzle. He's tough, he's brave, he's fast. I mean, this isn't the kind of player who's going to take the ball and go on a 50-yard run like Alan Hutton or Alan Evans back in the day and then blast home a blazing strike. That's not his game. He is stable, he is dependable, and he will play wherever Unai Emery asks him to play, and he will probably play well. Number 3, Philogene. Okay, maybe that's a little bit over the top, but honestly, this chap has been given every opportunity to make this team in the absence of Leon Bailey earlier this preseason, and of course the injured Jacob Ramsey, and Jadon Philogene has walked through that door. No, he's skipped through that door, whistling. And it's not the attacking contributions and his general tricky and slipperiness that I'm impressed with. It's the fact that he is willing to go back quickly and do all the ugly, annoying, dirty work that nobody wants to do on the defensive side of the game. I felt this player was going to make Villa's first team 2 years ago during that weird COVID preseason under Dean Smith. Remember 21-22? He was extremely effective during that preseason, contributing to goals, making life miserable for defenders. So you'd think a player who was very close to the first team in 21-22 would go on loan in the championship and have a relatively good time of it, but that wasn't necessarily the case for Philogene, who had a very unusual development pathway. I mean, football is not a straight line, and I do wonder if this guy is one of those rare and unusual players that simply performs better with and against the elite players, because the patterns are just somehow more logical at the top level, unlike at times in the championship where it's very chaotic, especially depending on what club you play for and what their table position is at the time. But this is a luxury that Unai Emery now has, because we've been linked with a lot of wingers in this window, including Jeremy Doku. I wonder if they abandon that and maybe look at other options within the squad that need shoring up. Number 2, Diaby delivers. And for Diaby to deliver on his debut was something to watch. Yes, this player is going to have to get in tune defensively and figure out when to press and helping to win the ball back higher up the field and tracking back, doing those ugly bits I talked about earlier under Unai Emery. But he's a dedicated professional. I think he'll have no problem adapting. But with a game in the balance, this is the reason why we paid a record fee for this player. The run, the timing of it, the pace, the control even after the bobble, and then the precision on the finish effectively put the game to bed. And it's more than just scoring a goal in a relatively meaningless preseason match that counts here. I think about it from the player's perspective. He's left a very stable, familiar, and comfortable environment in Leverkusen where he was valued, respected, where he was contributing, playing European football, signs for a record fee, which comes with some expectation, and all of a sudden he's with an entirely new group of people trying to impress his teammates, the manager, the supporters. And the very first time he slips on the fabled claret and blue strip, he scores on his one big chance as if it was somehow meant to be. Think of the alternative. He doesn't get a big chance, or he misses the one big chance that he does get, and he now has to stew over that for the next couple of days. This is going to give Moussa Diaby's confidence a monstrous lift. And the only thing that could possibly be better is if he managed to score in his next game. And the number one issue from Orlando and the Fulham match, transcendent Tielemans. Is Yuri Tielemans better than we even thought? I know last year would have been incredibly difficult on the Belgian. I mean, Leicester were relegated, obviously. There would have been problems with Brendan Rodgers, I imagine. It wasn't the greatest World Cup campaign with his country either. Only he will know the circumstances that led to a really difficult last year. But as I mentioned in the Yuri Tielemans signing show, this is the type of rare player that can literally dictate the tempo of a match. He is like the conductor of the orchestra. He went the full 90 against Fulham, and he was central in the lead up to the penalty and to the 1-0 goal. Prior to the penalty, Tielemans shows wonderful composure, strength, and savvy, quite frankly, to hold off a player and keep us in possession in a situation where others might have just knocked a hopeful ball up the line. He keeps us in possession. 44 seconds later, Cam Archer's brought down. Then prior to young Jadon's goal, he lays an inch-perfect ball in the path of Luca Dean, encouraging Dean to get forward and attack. The definition of a progressive pass, and a few moves later, it's 1-0. We have here a sublime footballer. And I realize he's in his best behavior phase right now with his new teammates and his manager, and it's a fresh start for him, which certainly doesn't hurt. But I'm hearing that within the staff, they're sitting there on the bench looking at each other. Can you believe what you're watching here? This guy is absolutely unbelievable. This guy is sublime, and we got him for free. And when I saw him and Douglas Luiz playing together, I saw the future, because we have two guys who are very good at both sides of the game, defensively, attack-wise, in their prime, pushing one another. It will be very interesting to see how that midfield solidifies, especially for the Premier League games. Just before we get to the Brentford outing, first of all, congratulations to the winner of the new Villa home shirt. One, because of following 24/7 Services UK on Instagram. Feel free to continue following the socials so you can keep track of the great work that they do. So I've sent a direct message to our winner via Instagram. Make sure you have a look. And speaking of 24/7 Services, look who invited Paul Handsaker over for an estimation on some bathroom suite work that he wanted done. None other than the voice of Villa Park, the lovely Dave Poulton, who I'm so honored to say is a viewer of this show. And this is a big week for 24/7 because they're starting a massive project at Wigan Station for Network Rail. So if you're rolling through that station, all the scaffolding and all the work there, that's 24/7 Services. And it's important to note that whether you are Network Rail or Dave Poulton, you are treated exactly the same way. A fair estimation, quote, good communication about when the services will be delivered, and a quality final product. On to not Maryland, but Emeryland. And a noon kickoff at FedEx Stadium would have been another very good physical test for our players because it's hot and humid there and the pitch was very dry and fast. And how good did our new second strip look on that pitch? I put a link in the description below if you want to order yours now. You'd be pre-ordering, of course. I have two ways of looking at a kit. How does it look on television and how does it look right up close? I think in both cases, it's good. And it looks really good when your team is playing like 1982 Brazil with Douglas Luiz operating as the role of Socrates. I mean, at times, it looked really, really exciting, which leads me to wonder, in an open-top parade, which route would Aston Villa take? Like, would you go straight down Broad Street, right through the town? Number 5, high line, high risk. I've talked about this before, but when Aston Villa play the high line, you are always vulnerable to the well-timed run and the perfectly played ball. And in this case, it led to the penalty. And in the Newcastle game, it led to the 2-1 goal. This is an open book, and every opponent knows that this is how you can catch Aston Villa, even though we were excellent last year at squeezing, trapping, and catching teams offside. By the way, Konsa did his very best to close down the space. How fast did he almost get back there and maybe even prevent the penalty? In fact, if you watch the replay again, he really doesn't contact the player. The player just falls over. Regardless, this is the book on Villa. This is going to cause us some anxious moments again in the coming year, and I'm not sure what the solution is other than Emi Martinez is going to have to be very alert outside his penalty area. Number 4, Jadon jumps past our Jamaican. This is the story of the preseason, and I realize that Leon Bailey only just returned from his extended summer because of Gold Cup commitments, but the fact that Unai Emery has put so much faith in this kid and given him such a big role, this time on the left against Brentford, and he looked as comfortable as he did on the right in the other games. And of course, Buendia could possibly start in this role on the left-hand side. But it does seem to spell the end then for Bertrand Traore, even though there are some in our fan base that say, well, Traore is a better player than Philogene. And what about Leon Bailey? Does this give Villa the flexibility to say, well, maybe we do put Leon Bailey up for sale because we could probably get a decent return if we need to fulfill another role within the squad. But I'd prefer for Leon to stay, fight for his place, and have this be his bounce back year. We are so disposable with footballers. Let's give the guy the benefit of the doubt and the chance to prove that he still belongs on this team. Number 3, Diaby doubles down. Not only did we get to see another Moussa Diaby goal, we got to see his versatility as an attack-minded player. He was on the left, he was on the right, he was straight down the center. We saw the inception of what could be a really nice partnership with Ollie Watkins on long balls, knockdowns, combining to try to win the ball back. And on his very well taken 2-2 goal, he uses his left foot to plant it with pace past the goalkeeper. But again, for a brand new signing to make it 2 goals in 2 games, what must that do for his confidence? Number 2, Tyrone and Torres together? What? Hopefully, this finally ends this ridiculous discussion that Mings and Torres can't play together because they're both left-footed center backs. That's just ridiculous. And we saw how it worked here. It worked rather effectively. Tyrone Mings is going to be in the lineup on opening day at Newcastle, and so is Pau Torres. Mings provides the defensive durability, stability, leadership, communication, all of that. Torres provides the craft and the danger of that through ball. Konsa provides the pace, which is why I think he's also starting on opening day. So let's please and mercifully put the Torres or Tyrone debate to rest. And the number 1 issue from Emeryland and the Brentford match, was that a Prem preview? Like, how close do you think that starting 11 was to what will be rolled out August 12th at St. James's Park? For me, there are only really 3 question marks, one being Matt Cash. I guess you could start Luca Dean on the left-hand side, but without Moreno and Ramsey, maybe Cash is the one asked to go forward and combine with Diaby or overlap Diaby. You could probably have a debate about Kamara versus Tielemans, and then it's really Philogene versus Bailey, but given the amount of minutes the kid has played, I'm giving the nod to the kid unless Emery decides to put Buendia there. But there can be no debate about Douglas Luiz, Ollie Watkins, Moussa Diaby, Tyrone Mings, Pau Torres, and John McGinn. Our captain is playing the role that he prefers, and Unai Emery has made it happen by making him our number 10 to support the attack, to play on the half turn, to accelerate through midfield and turn defenders, maybe drift wide at times and cross the ball, but still be able to drop back and make a crunching McGinn tackle. Up next, our final 2 preparation matches, and I'm going to review both of those together because there's such short distance between the 2 of them. And the way I read this, the group that started against Brentford on Sunday will start at Valencia, and the group that finished the game against Brentford, our second group, if you will start against Lazio at Walsall, just based on the distance between games and load management and all that stuff. So we're going to get a very good idea of how things could look at Newcastle on opening day. And there's also this small matter of a Europa Conference League draw forthcoming on the horizon, and Villa now in the seeded pool because Juventus was, as expected, expelled. I mean, there is so much to look forward to. Yes, I was excited last year, but there was also this nagging worry that maybe we weren't really as good as our preseason showed, and that turned out to be true this time, stylistically, performance-wise. There is a lot to be excited and thankful about, and that's why I'm going to savor every single last second. Until the next time, be well, and as always, up the mighty Villa.